Ambassador Park Jin-woo stood at the observation window of Unity Station, staring at the stars. His hands gripped the railing so tightly his knuckles had turned white. Behind him, holographic displays flickered with data he wished he could unsee. 6 colonies. 6 attacks. 500,000 dead. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Lieutenant Kim Sora stepped inside, her young face pale and drawn. She carried a data pad but her hands were shaking. Jin-woo didn't turn around. He already knew what she was going to say. "Sir," Sora began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have the report from New Hope." New Hope. The name felt like a cruel joke now. It had been humanity's proudest achievement, a world dedicated to art, science, and culture. Gardens that stretched for miles. Universities where the galaxy's brightest minds gathered. Concert halls where music from 100 worlds filled the air. 2.3 million people called it home. Called. Past tense. "Tell me," Jin-woo said quietly. Sora's voice cracked. The Krell fleet arrived without warning. They didn't target military installations because there weren't any. New Hope was a civilian world. They used thermobaric weapons on the cities. The heat was so intense it vaporized everything within the blast radius. Outside that, the pressure waves collapsed buildings like paper. Survivors? Less than 10,000. They were in deep emergency shelters. Everyone else. She couldn't finish the sentence. Jin-woo finally turned to face her. Sora was 28 years old. She had joined the diplomatic service because she believed in peace, in humanity's noble choice to put violence behind them. Now tears streamed down her face as she held out the data pad. He took it. The screen showed aerial footage of what had been New Hope's capital city. Where gleaming towers had stood yesterday, there was nothing but scorched earth and twisted metal. The garden districts were ash. The universities were craters. 2.3 million lives, ended in a matter of hours. "Director Lee is calling on the secure channel," Sora managed to say. Priority Alpha. Priority Alpha meant the highest level of emergency, existential threat to humanity. Jin-woo moved to his desk and activated the quantum-encrypted communications array. Director Lee Miho's face materialized in the hologram. Lee was 70 years old, a veteran of humanity's diplomatic corps. Jin-woo had never seen him look so old, so tired. "Jin-woo," Lee said. "I assume you've seen the reports. New Hope is gone." "Yes. And before they attacked, we sent them one final message. One last plea for peace." Lee's jaw tightened. "We begged them, Jin-woo. We told High Commander Thran that he didn't understand what he was awakening. We warned him that he was making a terrible mistake." "What did he say?" Lee's eyes were hard as stone. He laughed. He broadcast his response on an open channel across the entire sector. He called us cowards. He said our begging proved that humanity was a species of weaklings hiding behind technology we were too spineless to use. Jin-woo felt something cold and heavy settling in his chest. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was something worse. It was the terrible understanding that everything was about to change. For 150 years, humanity had been peaceful. They had joined the Galactic Coalition and proven themselves to be the most diplomatic, most accommodating species anyone had ever encountered. When border disputes arose, humans negotiated. When trade disagreements happened, humans compromised. When other species insulted them, humans smiled and moved on. The galaxy had come to see humanity as gentle giants, big, strong, technologically advanced, but utterly pacifist. Weak, harmless. What the galaxy didn't understand was that humanity's peace wasn't because they didn't know how to fight. It was because they knew how to fight too well. "The Defense Council is meeting in 2 hours, Lee continued. "Emergency session. Every colony representative will be there. We're bringing it to a vote." Jin-woo knew what it meant. There was only one vote that would require an emergency session of the entire Defense Council. Only one decision that would need Priority Alpha authorization. "The Remembrance Archives," he said softly. "Yes. And Protocol Vengeance." Lee leaned forward, his face filling the hologram. "Jin-woo, if this vote passes, and I believe it will, everything changes. We'll be opening doors that have been sealed for 150 years. We'll be remembering things we spent more than a century trying to forget." "I know. Do you? Do you really understand what we're about to do?" Lee's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "We chose peace, Jin-woo. We chose it because we looked at what we were becoming and it terrified us. We were so good at warfare that we nearly destroyed our own world. We made a conscious decision to be better than that. And now?" Jin-woo asked. "Now the Krell have taken that choice away from us. They've murdered 2.3 million civilians. They've laughed at our mercy. They've mistaken our restraint for weakness. Lee's expression hardened. The council is going to vote to show them the truth. And once we start down that path, there's no turning back. Jinwoo looked at the datapad again at the ruins of New Hope. He thought about the 2.3 million names that would need to be added to the memorial wall. Artists and scientists and teachers and children. All gone because the Krell thought humanity was weak. I'll be there, he said quietly. And I'll vote yes. Lee nodded slowly. I thought you would. Get your shuttle ready. We're returning to Earth. And Jinwoo? Send a message to Admiral Choi Sun-hee. Use the old military channels, the ones we haven't touched in 60 years. What should I tell her? Tell her it's time to wake up. After the call ended, Jinwoo stood alone in his office for a long time. Through the window, he could see ships from a dozen different species passing by, merchants and diplomats and tourists, all going about their peaceful business. None of them understood what was coming. None of them realized that they had pushed humanity too far. Lieutenant Sora appeared in the doorway again. Sir? Your shuttle is ready. And I sent the message to Admiral Choi. Did she respond? Yes, sir. She said. Sora paused, looking uncertain. She said she'd been waiting for this call for 60 years. She's on her way to Earth now. Jinwoo nodded. Admiral Choi Sun-hee was 89 years old. She had been 24 when she fought in the last battles of the Resource Wars, the conflicts that nearly ended human civilization. She was the last living human who had commanded troops in actual combat. For 60 years she had lived in quiet retirement, trying to forget what war looked like. Now they were about to ask her to remember. Across human space, in facilities that most civilians didn't even know existed, automated systems began receiving activation codes they hadn't processed in 150 years. Warning lights flickered on in empty corridors. Machinery that had been dormant for longer than most people had been alive started humming back to life. In hidden shipyards on the dark side of the moon, in hollow asteroids, in remote orbital platforms, humanity's true nature was beginning to stir. The peaceful giants were waking up. And the galaxy was about to learn that there was a vast difference between choosing peace and being incapable of war. The Krell had laughed at humanity's mercy. Soon they would understand exactly what that mercy had been protecting them from. The Defense Council chamber was buried 3 kilometers beneath the Swiss Alps. The journey down had taken Ambassador Park Jinwoo 20 minutes in a high-speed elevator that plunged through solid rock. The chamber itself was a perfect circle, carved from granite during Earth's darkest period. 47 chairs arranged in a ring, one for each human colony world. Emergency lighting cast long shadows across the ancient stone. Jinwoo took his seat, feeling the weight of history pressing down on him. This room had been built during the Resource Wars, when humanity had come within hours of destroying itself completely. The walls were thick enough to survive nuclear strikes. The air filtration system could sustain life for decades. It had been designed as a last refuge for human leadership if the world above burned. Today it served a different purpose. Director Lee Miho stood at the center of the circle. Beside him was an elderly woman Jinwoo had never seen before. She looked to be in her 90s, her silver hair pulled back severely, her eyes sharp and alert despite her age. Council members, Lee began, his voice echoing off the stone walls. Thank you for coming on such short notice. Before we proceed with the vote, I want to introduce Archive Master Han Myri. She is one of only 3 people in human space who has full access to the Remembrance Archives. Master Han, please. The old woman stepped forward. She moved with the careful precision of someone who had lived a very long time and intended to live longer still. When she spoke, her voice was surprisingly strong. I am going to show you something that has been hidden for 150 years, she said. Before I do, I want you to understand why it was hidden. Not because we were ashamed, though we were. Not because we wanted to forget, though we did. We sealed these records because our ancestors believed that some knowledge is too dangerous to share freely. She activated a holographic projector. The lights dimmed, and suddenly the chamber was filled with images of Earth. But not the Earth anyone recognized. This Earth was dying. The Resource Wars, Han Myri said softly. 2287 to 2301. 14 years of total war. The last great conflict of humanity before the unification. Jinwoo watched in horror as the images unfolded. Cities burning. Not just buildings on fire, but entire cities transformed into lakes of molten glass. The heat had been so intense that sand had fused into smooth, glowing surfaces that stretched for kilometers. We started with conventional weapons, Han continued. Missiles, bombs, artillery. Then we escalated. Nuclear weapons. Chemical weapons. Biological agents that could wipe out entire populations in days. The hologram showed a city, it might have been Shanghai or Mumbai or Sao Paulo, it was impossible to tell, covered in a strange red mist. People collapsed in the streets. Within minutes, every person in the frame was dead. Airborne hemorrhagic plague, Han explained. Engineered to spread faster than any natural disease. Mortality rate, 99.7%. It killed 50 million people in 3 weeks before it burned itself out. Representative Kim Taeyong from the colony of New Horizon raised his hand, his face pale. Master Han, why are you showing us this? Because you need to understand what humanity is capable of, she replied. The Krell think we're weak. They think pacifism means we can't fight. They're wrong. We know how to fight. We're very, very good at it. We're so good at it that we nearly killed ourselves. The images shifted. Now they showed weapons Jinwoo had never imagined. Satellites that could focus solar energy to create beams hot enough to boil oceans. Nanite clouds that consumed metal, turning tanks and aircraft into dust in seconds. Gravity bombs that crushed entire cities into singularities no larger than marbles. 15 billion people died in 14 years, Han said, her voice steady despite the horror on the screens. That's more than the total population of Earth before the wars began. You see, we didn't just kill soldiers. We killed everyone. Civilians, children, animals, plants. We poisoned rivers. We burned forests. We turned farmland into radioactive wasteland that still can't grow food today, 700 years later. The hologram showed Earth from space. Instead of the familiar blue marble, it was gray and brown, covered in clouds of ash and poison. The oceans were darker, choked with dead zones where nothing could live. By 2299, we had reduced Earth's population to 3 billion, Han continued. The planet itself was dying. The atmosphere was so polluted that breathing unfiltered air would kill you in hours. Most major cities were uninhabitable. We had maybe 10 years left before total ecological collapse would make Earth completely unable to support human life. Representative Lee Jaiwan from Mars spoke up, her voice shaking. How did we survive? The unification, Han replied. In 2301, the last remaining governments agreed to an unconditional ceasefire. Not because anyone won. Not because we ran out of weapons. We stopped because we finally realized we were about to commit species suicide. We looked at what we'd become and it terrified us. She paused, letting that sink in. The hologram shifted again, showing documents now. Treaties. Agreements. Laws. We made 3 promises, Han said. First, we would never again make war on each other. Second, we would seal all knowledge of our worst weapons in the Remembrance Archives, to be opened only in the most extreme circumstances. Third, we would dedicate ourselves to peace no matter the cost. Director Lee stepped forward. For 150 years, we've kept those promises. We've absorbed insults. We've paid reparations we didn't owe. We've negotiated when we could have demanded. We did all of this because we remembered what happens when humanity goes to war. He looked around the circle, meeting each representative's eyes. The Krell have destroyed New Hope. They've killed 2.3 million of our people. They've laughed at our pleas for peace. And now we must decide, do we continue to absorb these attacks, or do we show the galaxy what we've been hiding? Ambassador Park Jin-woo found his voice. If we open the archives, if we activate Protocol Vengeance, what does that actually mean? Han Myri's expression was grim. It means we stop pretending to be civilians playing at defense. It means we activate the shipyards we've been calling mining facilities. It means we convert those dual-use civilian vessels into the warships they were always designed to be. It means we call Admiral Choi Sun-hee out of retirement to lead a fleet that has been waiting in mothballs for 150 years. And it means, Director Lee added, that we use every tactic, every weapon, every lesson learned from 10,000 years of human warfare. The galaxy practices ritualized combat with rules and honor codes. We don't. We've never fought for glory or honor. We fight to win by any means necessary. Representative Nam Yuna from the colony of Aurora stood up, tears streaming down her face. My sister lived on New Hope. She was a teacher. She had 3 children. They're all dead now because the Krell thought we were weak. Her voice hardened. I vote yes. Open the archives. Show them what we really are. One by one, the other representatives stood. From Earth. From Mars. From the 44 surviving colonies. Even the 10 representatives from New Hope, survivors speaking for their dead world. When the vote was called, it was unanimous. 47-0. Director Lee placed his hand on a biometric scanner that had not been active in living memory. By the authority granted to me by the United Human Colonies, I hereby authorize the opening of the Remembrance Archives and the activation of Protocol Vengeance. Deep beneath the chamber, massive vault doors began to open for the first time in 150 years. Inside were terabytes of data, weapons specifications, tactical manuals, strategic doctrines developed over millennia of warfare. Everything humanity had learned about how to kill efficiently. Master Han spoke one last time. May whatever gods exist forgive us for what we're about to remember. Across human space, automated systems received activation codes. In hidden facilities, lights flickered on. Engineers stared in shock as mining equipment retracted to reveal warship construction bays. Weapons that had been sealed away began their activation sequences. And on a quiet farm on Earth, a very old woman named Choi Sun-hee received a message she had been waiting 60 years to hear. It was time to remember how to make war. 6 months had passed since the Defense Council vote. 6 months of preparation that had transformed human space from a peaceful federation into something else entirely. Admiral Choi Sun-hee stood on the bridge of the HDS Reckoning, hands clasped behind her back, watching the tactical display with the calm focus of someone who had done this before. She was 89 years old. Her hair was white, her face lined with wrinkles. But her eyes were sharp, and her voice carried the authority of someone who had commanded soldiers in actual war. She was the last of her kind, the last human alive who remembered what real combat looked like. "Admiral," said Commander Bae Seo-jun from the tactical station. "We're receiving multiple contacts. Krell fleet is waiting for us at the Proxima Threshold." The Proxima Threshold was a neutral zone, a buffer of empty space between human territory and the Krell Dominion. It was where the Krell had chosen to make their stand. "How many ships?" Choi asked calmly. Bae's fingers danced across his console, reading the sensor data. 2,147 vessels, Admiral. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers. They're arranged in standard Krell battle formation, wedge shape with heavy capital ships at the center, lighter vessels on the flanks. Lieutenant Kim Sora, now serving as communications officer, looked nervous. She had been a diplomatic aide 6 months ago. Now she wore the uniform of the Human Defense Fleet. "Admiral, they're broadcasting a message. High Commander Thran wants to speak with you." "Put him through," Choi said. The view screen flickered to life. High Commander Thran appeared, his reptilian features twisted in what might have been a smile. His scales gleamed under harsh lighting. When he spoke, the translator rendered his hissing words into Korean. "So the cowards finally show themselves," Thran said. "I see you brought 500 ships. How brave. How foolish." He leaned forward. "I, High Commander Thran of the Krell Dominion, challenge you to honorable combat. Form your battle line and face us properly if you have the courage." Admiral Choi's expression didn't change. "High Commander Thran, you destroyed New Hope. You killed 2.3 million civilians. Men, women, children. You vaporized entire cities. And?" Thran's mandibles clicked. "They were weak. Just as you are weak. Your pathetic fleet will be destroyed and then we will finish what we started. Every human world will burn." "I see," Choi said quietly. "Commander Thran, you've made a mistake. You think this is about honor. You think we're here to prove our courage in glorious battle." She leaned closer to the screen. "We're not. We're here to teach you what happens when you attack humanity. This isn't going to be a battle. This is going to be an execution." She cut the transmission. "All ships," Choi said into the fleet-wide channel. "Implement Protocol Nightfall. Cyber warfare units, you are weapons-free. Drone squadrons, launch on my mark." Commander Bae looked up from his station. "Admiral, the Krell fleet is advancing. They're expecting us to meet them in traditional formation." "Then they're going to be very disappointed," Choi replied. "Launch drones." What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for generations to come. It would also give every species nightmares about what humanity was truly capable of. The first wave wasn't warships. It was 3,000 small drones, each no larger than a fighter craft. They shot forward at incredible speed, accelerating to nearly the speed of light. The Krell sensors detected them, but the Krell commanders weren't worried. Small craft couldn't hurt their massive battleships. They were wrong. Each drone carried a small amount of antimatter in a magnetic containment field. When the drones hit the Krell ships, the containment failed. Matter met antimatter at relativistic speeds. The explosions were blinding. In 14 seconds, 97 Krell ships simply ceased to exist. They didn't explode gradually. They were there one moment and gone the next, replaced by expanding spheres of pure energy. On Thran's flagship, alarm screamed. What was that? He demanded. His tactical officer stared at the display in shock. They used suicide drones with antimatter warheads. Nearly 100 ships destroyed. An admiral were detecting another attack. They're broadcasting something on our command frequencies. The officer's console went dark. Then every console on the bridge flickered and died. Get systems back online. Thran roared. We're trying, sir. They've infiltrated our network. Every ship in the fleet, we can't communicate with each other. The command network is completely compromised. Across the Krell fleet, the same scene repeated. 2,000 ships that had been operating as one coordinated force were suddenly isolated. They couldn't talk to each other. They couldn't share tactical data. They couldn't call for help or coordinate their defenses. Each Krell ship was alone in the dark. Attack formation beta, Choi ordered calmly. Target their capital ships first. Use railguns full power. The human warships moved forward, but not in the neat battle lines the Krell expected. They scattered, moving in unpredictable patterns, striking from angles the Krell hadn't anticipated. Railguns fired. These weren't energy weapons that the Krell could defend against with shields. These were solid projectiles. Chunks of dense metal accelerated to enormous speeds by magnetic coils. They hit with kinetic energy that no shield could stop. A Krell battleship took a railgun round through its forward section. The projectile punched through armor like it was paper, traveled the length of the ship in a fraction of a second, and exited through the engines. The battleship broke in half, atmosphere venting in glittering clouds of frozen air. Commander Bay watched his tactical display with grim satisfaction. Enemy vessels are trying to return fire, but their targeting systems are giving them false readings. They're shooting at ghost targets. Good, Choi said. Continue the attack. Target life support systems on any ship that refuses to surrender. Lieutenant Sora looked shocked. Admiral, targeting life support? That's effective, Choi interrupted. The Krell fight by honor codes. They believe in glorious combat, warrior traditions, dying with dignity. We don't. We fight to win with minimum casualties to our own forces. If destroying their life support makes them surrender faster, that's what we do. A Krell cruiser lost power, drifting helplessly. Human missiles struck its oxygen generators. The ship's lights flickered and died. Within minutes, the crew was evacuating in escape pods. Admiral, enemy escape pods launching from multiple ships, Bay reported. Are they armed? Choi asked. No, ma'am. They're abandoning ship. Then leave them alone. We don't kill refugees. Mark their positions and transmit coordinates to coalition rescue services. But any ship that keeps fighting? No mercy. The battle, if it could even be called that, continued for 72 hours. But it wasn't really a battle. It was systematic destruction. The human fleet moved through the Krell formation like surgeons, cutting away threats with precision. The Krell tried everything. They attempted ramming attacks, but human point defense destroyed the ships before they could connect. They tried to retreat, but human vessels cut off escape routes. They tried to surrender, but Choi only accepted complete, unconditional surrender. Abandon ship, transmit all military codes, scuttle the vessel. By the end of the third day, the tactical display told the story. Of the 2,147 Krell ships that had waited at Proxima Threshold, 1,647 were destroyed or captured. Human losses, 23 ships, most of them damaged rather than destroyed. High Commander Thran's flagship was boarded by human marines in powered armor. They stormed the bridge, weapons ready, and found Thran slumped in his command chair, wounded and defeated. Admiral Choi walked onto the captured bridge herself. She looked at the Krell commander, this being who had laughed at humanity's pleas for peace. You destroyed New Hope, she said quietly. You killed 2.3 million people. You thought we were weak because we begged you to stop. Thran's translator rendered his hissing words. You fight without honor. You use tactics that violate every principle of warfare. You're monsters. No, Choi replied. We're humans, and you made us remember what that means. You wanted war. Now you have it. And you're learning that there's a difference between ritual combat and actual war. She turned to her Marines. Take him into custody. He'll stand trial for genocide. As Thran was dragged away, he looked back at her with something new in his eyes. Not anger. Not pride. Fear. What are you? He asked. Choi's expression was cold. We're the species that spent 10,000 years learning how to kill each other. We got so good at it that it scared us. So we stopped. We chose peace. She paused. You took that choice away. This is what happens when you awaken something that was trying very hard to sleep. The human fleet began moving deeper into Krell space. The war wasn't over. It had barely begun. The Krell homeworld turned slowly in the darkness of space, a sphere of deep red continents and purple oceans. Defensive satellites orbited in protective rings, weapons platforms that had guarded Krell Prime for 300 years. No enemy had ever breached them. No invader had ever come close. Until now. High Marshal Vex stood in the command center deep beneath the capital city, watching the tactical display with growing horror. 500 human warships hung in orbit, arranged in a perfect sphere around the planet. They weren't moving. They weren't shooting. They were just there. Waiting. Marshal, his tactical officer said, voice trembling. They've established a complete orbital blockade. Every approach vector is covered. They're jamming all communications beyond planetary orbit. We can't send messages out and no one can reach us. What about our defense platforms? Vec demanded. Still functional, sir. But they're not attacking them. The humans are staying just beyond effective range. Vec's claws clicked against the stone floor as he paced. This wasn't how warfare worked. The humans should be attacking, trying to destroy the platforms, attempting planetary bombardment. Instead, they just sat there like predators watching trapped prey. Then every screen in the command center flickered. Vex spun around as Admiral Choi Sun-hee's face appeared on the displays. Not just in the command center. His officers were reporting that she was on every screen across the planet. Military displays, civilian news broadcasts, even personal communication devices. Every Krell on the homeworld was seeing this. People of Krell Prime, the old human woman said, her words translated perfectly into Krell standard. I am Admiral Choi Sun-hee of the United Human Fleet. Your military destroyed one of our worlds. They killed 2.3 million civilians. Men, women, and children. We have systematically destroyed 47 of your military installations. We have eliminated over 2,000 of your warships. We have done this in 63 days. Vec felt his blood turn cold. 63 days. The Krell Dominion, which had conquered half a sector over 3 centuries, had been dismantled in 2 months. We could destroy your homeworld in 63 minutes, Admiral Choi continued. Her voice was calm, matter-of-fact, which somehow made it more terrifying. Our weapons are in position. We could bombard your cities until nothing remains. But we won't. Because unlike your commanders, we do not make war on civilians. Around Vec, his officers exchanged uncertain glances. What kind of enemy announced they could win but chose not to? You have 30 days, Admiral Choi said. 30 days to surrender your military command structure. Every officer involved in the New Hope attack will stand trial for war crimes. If you comply, your civilians will not be harmed. Your world will not be destroyed. If you refuse, we will maintain this blockade until your government collapses from within. There will be no negotiation. There will be no second chances. You have 30 days. The transmission ended. Every screen went dark simultaneously. For a long moment, the command center was completely silent. Then the reports started flooding in. Civilian panic in the streets. Riots outside government buildings. The stock markets crashing. Food distribution systems overwhelmed as people rushed to stockpile supplies. Marshal, what do we do? Asked General Cross, the senior military advisor. Vec looked at the orbital display. 500 human ships, completely surrounding the planet. Call an emergency meeting of high command. All senior officers. Now. 2 hours later, 12 of the Krell's highest-ranking military officers sat around a circular table in a shielded bunker. Vec stood at the head, feeling the weight of their species' survival on his shoulders. Surrender is unthinkable, General Cross said immediately. The Krell Dominion has never surrendered in its 300-year history. We are warriors. We fight to the death. Then we'll die, said Admiral Tesh quietly. She was the youngest officer present, only 60 years old. Marshal, I've reviewed the battle reports from Proxima Threshold. From every engagement. The humans don't fight like anyone we've ever faced. They don't care about honor or glory. They just win. Efficiently. Brutally. We have the defense platforms, Cross insisted. If they try to attack. They won't attack, Vec interrupted. Don't you see? They're smarter than that. They'll just wait. They've cut off all our supply lines. No food shipments from the colony worlds. No fuel imports. No raw materials. We have maybe 3 months of supplies before rationing becomes critical. 6 months before we start starving. He pulled up economic projections. Our economy is already collapsing. Civilian shipping has stopped. Interstellar trade is impossible with the blockade. Unemployment is rising by the hour. In 2 weeks we'll have food riots. In a month, our government will be fighting civilian uprisings. The humans are turning our own people against us, Admiral Tesh said. And they're doing it without firing a single shot at the planet. Then we break the blockade, Cross argued. We have garrison fleets in the outer systems. Call them back. Coordinate a simultaneous attack from inside and outside the blockade. Vec shook his head. I already tried. Our long-range communications are jammed. We can't reach the garrison fleets. Even if we could, they'd be sailing into a trap. The humans have proven they can destroy our ships with minimal losses. Days passed. The situation on Krell Prime deteriorated rapidly. Food distribution broke down as panic buying emptied stores. The government imposed strict rationing, but it was too late. People were hungry and angry. On day 7, Admiral Choi made good on an unexpected promise. Human supply ships approached the planet, broadcasting on all frequencies. We are delivering food and medical supplies to civilian distribution centers. We will not allow civilians to starve. These supplies are for non-combatants only. Vec watched in disbelief as human ships, under heavy guard, delivered tons of food to cities across Krell Prime. They bypassed the military entirely, going straight to civilian authorities. They're feeding our people? General Cross said, stunned. It's psychological warfare, Vec replied grimly. They're showing our civilians that humans care more about Krell lives than their own military does. They're turning the population against us. He was right. Within days, civilian protests erupted. Not against the humans, but against their own military leadership. Signs appeared in the streets, surrender and save us, and the military brought this war. On day 15, a massive civilian demonstration surrounded the military headquarters. Hundreds of thousands of Krell demanding that their leaders surrender. In the command bunker, the high command meeting had devolved into shouting matches. We must fight. Cross roared. It's our duty as warriors. Our duty is to our people. Admiral Tesh shot back. What good is warrior pride if our entire species starves? Vec looked around the table at his fellow officers. Some were defiant, ready to fight to the death. Others looked tired, defeated, realistic. The Krell Dominion was fracturing from within, exactly as the humans had planned. We have 2 choices, Vec said quietly. Fight and watch our civilization tear itself apart while humans wait patiently. Or surrender the command structure and hope they keep their word about sparing civilians. You want to surrender? Cross stood up, his scales flushed with anger. You're a coward. I'm a realist, Vec replied. The humans didn't come here to conquer us. They came here to punish us. Specifically, to punish those responsible for New Hope. If we surrender the guilty parties, they'll leave. If we don't, they'll wait until we destroy ourselves. I won't surrender, Cross said. I'd rather die with honor. Admiral Tesh stood up too, but she faced Cross, not Vec. Then you'll die alone. Marshal Vec is right. This isn't about honor anymore. It's about survival. The debate raged for hours. But outside the bunker, events were moving faster. On day 23, Admiral Tesh made a decision. She contacted loyalist officers who shared her view. In a coordinated action, they arrested General Cross and 6 other hardline commanders. When Vec learned what had happened, he found Tesh in her office. You staged a coup, he said. I saved our species, she replied. Marshal, you know I'm right. We contact the humans. We surrender. We give them what they want. It's the only way forward. Vec was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Draft the surrender message. Unconditional terms. We'll give them everything they ask for. The message went out on day 24, to Admiral Choi Sun-hee. The Krell High Command formally surrenders. We will provide complete documentation of all military operations, including those responsible for the New Hope attack. We request terms for the protection of the Krell people. On the HDS Reckoning, Admiral Choi read the message twice. Lieutenant Kim Sora stood beside her, hardly daring to breathe. Do you think they mean it? Sora asked. Yes, Choi replied. They're beaten and they know it. We didn't have to destroy a single city. We just had to show them that resistance was futile. She began typing. Prepare the terms. Full demilitarization. War crimes trials. Reparations. Coalition oversight. The blockade had worked. The Krell Dominion had fallen without the humans firing a single shot at their homeworld. Sometimes, Choi reflected, the most devastating weapon wasn't a bomb. It was patience. The Galactic Court of Justice was located on Unity Station, the same place where Ambassador Park Jin-woo had first learned about New Hope's destruction. But the chamber looked different now. Security had been increased tenfold. Armed guards from neutral species stood at every entrance. The observation galleries were packed with representatives from dozens of worlds, all here to witness something unprecedented. A war crimes trial against an entire military command structure. Jin-woo stood at the prosecutor's table, organizing his files one last time. Across the courtroom sat High Commander Thran and 247 Krell officers, all wearing restraints. Thran's scales had dulled during his months in captivity. He no longer looked like the confident warrior who had laughed at humanity's pleas for peace. He looked tired, defeated. The 7 judges entered, representatives from the Valerian Empire, the Nexian Collective, and 5 other species. Carefully chosen to be neutral. No Krell. No humans. Just impartial observers who would decide if what happened to New Hope constituted genocide. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Jin-woo presented evidence methodically, piece by piece. Survivor testimony from the few thousand who had made it to deep shelters. Communications logs showing Thran's orders. Tactical analysis proving that New Hope had no military installations, no defensive capabilities, nothing that could threaten the Krell. The attack on New Hope was not a military action, Jin-woo told the court on the first day. It was deliberate extermination of civilians. 2.3 million people died. Not soldiers. Not warriors. Teachers. Artists. Children. They died because High Commander Thran wanted to terrify humanity into submission. Thran's defense attorney, a respected Valerian lawyer named Kesh, argued that his client had believed he was acting within standard warfare protocols. The Krell viewed humanity as a military threat. My client made a tactical decision based on incomplete information. Incomplete information? Jin-woo pulled up holographic displays. Here is the message we sent before the attack. We specifically stated that New Hope was a civilian colony with no military presence. We begged Commander Thran to verify our claims before acting. He refused. He attacked anyway. The evidence was damning. Communications showed that Thran had received multiple warnings about New Hope's civilian status. Intelligence reports confirmed there were no military targets on the planet. Yet he had ordered the attack anyway, using thermobaric weapons designed to maximize casualties. On the 3rd week, the court heard from survivors. A woman named Yoon Minji took the stand. She had been a music teacher on New Hope. Her voice shook as she testified. I was in an underground shelter with my students when the bombing started. We could feel the ground shaking. The emergency systems showed us what was happening on the surface. The cities were just gone. Vaporized. My husband was at work. My parents were shopping. They all died in the first minutes. And after the attack? Jin-woo asked gently. We stayed in the shelter for 3 days before rescue ships arrived. When we finally came out, there was nothing left. Nothing. Just ash and burned ground. 2.3 million people lived on New Hope. Less than 10,000 survived. Thran watched the testimony with no visible emotion. But some of the other Krell officers looked uncomfortable. A few couldn't meet the survivors' eyes. By the 4th week, even Kesh, the defense attorney, was running out of arguments. The evidence was too clear. The attack had been deliberate. The casualties had been intentional. There was no legitimate military justification. On the final day of testimony, Jin-woo gave his closing argument. The courtroom was completely silent as he spoke. Your Honors, the evidence is clear. High Commander Thran and his officers committed genocide. They deliberately targeted a civilian population with weapons of mass destruction. They ignored warnings. They laughed at pleas for mercy. And when it was over, they celebrated their victory. He paused, looking at each judge in turn. But this trial is about more than just punishing the guilty. It's about sending a message to the entire galaxy. For 150 years, humanity chose peace. We absorbed insults. We paid reparations we didn't owe. We negotiated when we could have demanded. The galaxy saw this as weakness. The Krell thought they could attack us without consequences. They were wrong. Humanity is peaceful by choice, not by necessity. We know how to fight. We're very good at it. We're so good at it that it scared us, so we chose to stop. But when you murder 2.3 million of our civilians, when you laugh at our mercy, you force us to remember what we can do. Jinwoo's voice hardened. The Krell learned that lesson. Their military was dismantled in 2 months. Not because we wanted conquest. Not because we sought glory. Because we wanted justice. And we want the galaxy to understand. Attacking peaceful species doesn't make you strong. It makes you a war criminal. The judges deliberated for 3 days. When they returned, the head judge, a Valerian elder named Tresh, read the verdict. In the matter of the Galactic Coalition versus High Commander Thran and others, this court finds the defendants guilty of genocide, war crimes, and crimes against sapient species. The attack on New Hope was deliberate, unjustified, and constituted the mass murder of civilians. Thran didn't react. He had known this was coming. Sentencing will be as follows. High Commander Thran and his senior command staff are sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of parole. Lesser officers will receive sentences ranging from 20 to 50 years, depending on their level of involvement. As guards led Thran from the courtroom, he stopped beside Jinwoo's table. For a moment the two locked eyes. "You've won," Thran said through his translator. "But at what cost? You've become what you claimed to hate. Warriors. Killers." Jinwoo met his gaze steadily. "No. We became what we needed to be to survive. There's a difference. We didn't want this war. You forced it on us. And now you'll spend the rest of your life thinking about the 2.3 million people who died because you mistook mercy for weakness." After Thran was taken away, Jinwoo walked to the observation deck. Admiral Choi was there looking out at the stars. She had retired immediately after the surrender, but she had come to witness the verdict. "It's done," Jinwoo said quietly. "Yes," Choi replied. "Justice has been served. But I wonder, was it worth it?" "What do you mean?" The old admiral was quiet for a long moment. "We won the war. We proved we're not weak. But look what it cost us. For 150 years we were peaceful. We had put violence behind us. And in 2 months, we remembered everything we tried to forget. We became warriors again. We didn't have a choice." "I know," Choi said. "That's what makes it so hard. We were forced to become something we didn't want to be. And now we can't go back. The fleet isn't being mothballed this time. The weapons aren't being sealed away. We've learned that lesson. Peace requires the capacity for violence even if you choose not to use it." Jinwoo nodded slowly. "The galaxy will never see us the same way again." "No," Choi agreed. "But maybe that's not entirely bad. Respect born from fear is better than being seen as weak. Other species will think twice before attacking human worlds now." "At what cost to our souls?" Jinwoo asked. Choi didn't have an answer to that. Across human space the fleet remained active. Defense training continued. The Remembrance Archive stayed open, their contents now taught in military academies. Humanity had tried to forget how to make war. That experiment was over. But something else changed too. New courses appeared in schools: ethics of warfare, rules of engagement, protection of civilians. Humans were teaching their children not just how to fight but when to fight, and just as importantly, when to stop. On Earth, a new memorial was built. It listed every name from New Hope, all 2.3 million of them. But it also listed the names of the 1,647 Krell ships destroyed in the war. Not to celebrate the victory but to remember the cost. The inscription read, "War is not glorious. It is necessary only when all else fails. We chose peace. We were forced to war. May we never forget the difference." A year after the trial, Ambassador Park Jin-woo stood at that memorial. A young Krell approached hesitantly, one of the few civilians living on Earth as part of a cultural exchange program. "Ambassador," the young Krell said, "I wanted to thank you. The military coup that followed the surrender overthrew the old regime. My generation is trying to build something different. Something peaceful." Jin-woo nodded. "I hope you succeed. War benefits no one." "Can I ask you something?" the Krell continued. "Do you regret it? The campaign? What your people did to mine?" Jin-woo was quiet for a long time, thinking about all they had lost and gained. "I regret that it was necessary," he finally said. "I regret that 2.3 million people had to die before your military understood that humanity wasn't weak, just restrained. I regret that we had to show the galaxy our true nature." He looked at the young Krell. "But would I do it again to save my people?" "Yes. That's what makes it so heavy to carry." Above them, the human fleet patrolled in silent vigilance. Peaceful but no longer mistaken for weak. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humanity hoped it would never need to teach it again. But if necessary they would. They had remembered how. And they would never forget again.